Hey everyone, I'm Donna Chacko, and I'm here once again with Susan Riggs. Hi, Susan.
Hi.
We are up to episode 5 on engaging with a messy world. And I guess we have to continue because it's still messy. So here we are. And this is a good one. This you may have to think about a bit uh, about accepting your own responsibility for stuff and how to sort that out. So it's just a great topic. And I think Susan's going to do a really good job of explaining it and also helping us understand where it fits into the other lessons we've already had about our feelings and our narratives and such. So, as you all know, we're doing these recordings. We're putting them out there on YouTube. We want to get this word spread to as many people as possible because both Susan and I are so convinced this kind of self work can make a huge difference in relationships and society and such, and just peace of mind for each of us as well. So, with that introduction, Susan, and I didn't say Susan is an integral coach and an old friend and has a lot of experience in all this kind of thing. So, she's a very valuable, reliable resource, and I can vouch for her 100%. So, please give her your full attention. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Susan.
Thank you. Yeah, and I will say I'm drawing on the wisdom of a whole lot of very wise people, wiser than I am. I'm happy to share what I have learned. So today I want to talk about a very cool idea around taking responsibility. So when we are part of a team or a group or a community or a couple, and there are problems, our human tendency is to want to parcel out blame for it or responsibility for it. We think that this person or group is mostly responsible and that person or group is partly responsible, and maybe I have about 10% responsibility. Um, but my own contribution is very small, is the default assumption. Spoiler alert, there's always some contribution that each of us is making to the problems that we're experiencing. So we tend to want to parcel out blame as if it were pie. So, everybody gets a wedge. Somebody might get a 60% wedge and somebody gets a 30% wedge, and maybe I get a 10% wedge. But we want to parcel it out that way. And we want the person or group who has the biggest slice of pie in our mind to step up and fix the problem because they're the biggest part of the problem in my mind. Uh, so that's what we want to do, but it doesn't actually work. It doesn't get us anywhere. So that's the starting point. We have a default approach and it doesn't necessarily get us anywhere. So before we launch into what to do differently, I want to say it's not easy.
No, no, that's, I think that's the hardest part, Susan, because we all have problems, right? And we know how it feels, but to accept and understand that it is our problem, so clearly we're involved. And if we don't accept any responsibility, it's never going to be solved because we certainly can't enforce change in all the other players. We can only affect change in ourselves. Uh, anyway, that's the hard part. That's the first important step, to take time and open up your mind and heart to try and assess um, what is your part.
Yes. And it can be quite uncomfortable. Feeling uncomfortable is often a sign that good growth is happening. So yay. Um, so there's a really interesting shift that can happen if we think about this differently. Um, if we change the mindset and instead of focusing on other people's piece of the pie, we shift to wholeheartedly accepting our own share of the responsibility. Other people still have their responsibility. I'm not taking theirs on, but I am shifting my attention away from thinking what they should do differently and thinking about what I need to take responsibility for wholeheartedly. I'm not spending my energy on trying to control what isn't mine to control. There's a really nice video of this on the website of the Conscious Leadership Group, conscious.is, and it'll be linked in the show notes. It's a short video, just a few minutes, that explains this with the analogy of the pies, and it's a really good way to get
Yes.
kind of oriented to this way of thinking. I encourage everybody to watch that. Um, so so we think about pies and we think about, I'm actually not going to think about my responsibility as a slice of the whole pie. I'm going to think about it as I have a whole pie. And other people have their own whole pies, and they need to take responsibility for their pies. But I'm going to focus on my pie and take care of it
Yes.
100%.
Whatever percent of the whole messy problem that is yours is 100% yours, and that's your pie.
Yes.
You don't take on,
Yes,
just so people understand, she's not taking on the whole mess. You're taking on your slice, which is 100% all yours.
exactly. Yes. So, to help us get a handle on this, I'm going to offer a personal example because, as always, I'm learning these things as I go through my life. It's a never-ending learning curve. So, a few years ago, when I began being self-employed and working from home, I had to figure out a workspace in a small condo that I share with my husband. So, I set myself up in the living room and asked him to respect that as my workspace and my work time when I was there. And he would come in at random times and ask, "Oh, just a quick question, a quick little tech support, little something." and and it was driving me nuts. And I figured at first it was his problem because he wasn't respecting my request, which is true as far as it goes. But there was more to it, and it wasn't working. I needed to change something because it clearly wasn't working. So I stepped back and examined what I was doing, and I realized that I wasn't being consistent. I was sometimes starting conversations from over there in my workspace. And so I was giving him mixed signals. So I thought of a creative solution. I just turned my chair around. So I have a movable desk and I turned it around and my chair. And now when I'm working, my back is to the rest of the condo. And it's a clear visual cue for my husband.
Genius. Genius.
Yes. And the interesting thing is that it helps me focus better too, because I'm not distracted by everything else.
Mhm.
And so it's a win-win. I'm focusing better. He's more easily respecting my work time. And it worked because I took responsibility for my piece, my contribution to it. Um, and I was really pleased with that solution.
You should be.
Thank you.
Oh gosh. Um, the one thing about this pie thing, about this taking your responsibility, that I can just hear people thinking, well, I don't get it though. If I'm just paying attention to my 100%, those other people are going to walk all over me. They're not going to do their part, and it's not fair. So,
Right.
what do you help us work through that one?
Yes. So this work takes some responsibility, it takes some emotional maturity, and often people will need to work with a coach or a therapist or both in order to really get a handle on it. And part of it is that boundaries really are important. We need to be clear about our boundaries, how we're setting them, and how we're backing them up with action. Otherwise, people will indeed walk all over us. But I want to point out that letting people walk over us is a failure of taking responsibility. So if I set a clear boundary and somebody does something to me about it, and I don't take action of some kind, I am failing in my responsibility. Um, Sometimes the backing up a boundary with action, sometimes that can just mean having a serious conversation. Look, this is not okay. Sometimes it means backing away from a friendship a little bit, leaving a job, leaving a relationship, calling the police, depending on the nature of the boundary violation. All of these things are potential responses that can be part of my 100% responsibility. And I have done many of those things, intervening when somebody was harming someone else, because that is my responsibility.
Yeah, but that's so hard for many of us. I'm glad you're stressing it because that's part of your responsibility to your problem solving. It is, uh, the blame game. We can blame ourselves. We can blame others, but being honest about personal responsibility. You know, is this where we're going to talk about the neat tidy thing? Because that's a perfect example.
Yeah, yeah, we may as well talk about that. Yeah, you had mentioned the
Well, it's
very
a
common example of couple.
very common problem. Two people living together, one's messy, one's tidy, and trying to. So, say I'm the tidy person. So I have a problem, and my problem is you because you're messy, right? Isn't that pretty straightforward?
That's a good narrative to start with. That's that's clearly a narrative.
So take us
Um,
through that, maybe a more healthy approach.
yes. So if I were coaching a person who is a tidy one in a tidy and messy couple, I would start by asking the tidy person, so what stories are you telling yourself about this? What are you believing about this? Tidy is good and messy is bad. That's one possible narrative. This other person is irresponsible. Um, I need tidiness to stay sane. Any number of things which are not necessarily right or wrong. They're narratives, and they can be more backed up by facts or less backed up by facts, but we need to examine them and understand that they are not facts in and of themselves. We need to figure out what the stories are. My mother won't love me if I live in a place that is messy. All kinds of things can come out. So, as you mentioned earlier, the episodes that we are recording build on each other. And so the first one is identify the narratives. So that's the first step. The second step is to feel the feelings. And people who come in wanting help with a problem like a messy roommate or spouse, they're having some feelings about it. And so we will work with that and examine where in the body am I feeling this and what am I feeling? Anger, fear, anxiety, sadness. There's a lot there, and it can take some time to unpack it. Underneath the stories, there's some pretty intense feelings often. And once we have unpacked that, it helps to look at the systems that we're in. What assumptions are we coming in with from our society about who does the work of staying tidy, from our families? Um, it's good to be
Can I,
aware of assumptions.
can
Sorry?
I ask you a question about this? So, like
Yeah.
in this scenario, how I get right back to that hard issue about trying to be honest and see yourself as you really are, and your responsibility. Because I could see that in this particular problem, the tidy person might possibly be a total control freak. You know, maybe with some OCD, maybe some significant stuff going on, right? And possibly be oblivious to it,
Right. And
maybe.
that's why we start by trying to flush out the narratives. What are you believing about this
Yeah,
situation? Because that will tend to illuminate um, issues like that, control, worries. Somebody who wants to control everything often is very anxious, and that
right,
comes back to old fears.
right,
So it's really important to look at the narratives and the feelings before we try to reach a solution.
right. Good.
Yeah. So we're looking at the systems because nobody is operating in a vacuum. We're operating with all of the assumptions of all of the cultures that we are exposed to. It's good to look at those. And then it's good to start being curious. Not I'm right, that it's good to be tidy, and you're wrong to be messy. But I wonder what it's like for you. If there is a viable relationship here, the tidy person can bring some curiosity. What does it feel like for you to throw your clothes everywhere? How does it feel when I tidy up and the place is beautiful? Um, Bringing some curiosity to the conversations, and this is a long process. This is not a quick fix. Um, and then we come to this episode, episode 5, about taking responsibility, which means I have to decide now. I've got this information about my feelings and my narratives and my curiosity about my partner. What am I going to do with this? And that is going to depend on all the information that we have shed light on up till now. It might be I decide I am overly anxious and I need to work with a therapist about my anxiety and let go of the need to control. But it could be my partner is willfully undermining me and my work, and I need to end this relationship. Or it could be somewhere, many places in between, like partner loves to be messy. I'm going to give them a room, or they will pick a room in the house in which they can be as messy as they like, and I'll stay out of it. There are lots of solutions, and which one you pick is going to depend on what kind of feelings and narratives and curiosity and systems we've identified.
Yes. I wonder how many marriages have been saved by housekeepers.
Housekeeper is definitely one of the solutions, and it depends on the nature of the issue too. So yeah,
That's
it's
helpful. That's
complicated,
helpful.
but it is fixable if we're willing to take responsibility for, okay, I am uncomfortable with the situation. I have a problem and a responsibility to work with it, which may involve saying, you're a jerk and I'm done. Or um, you need to go to therapy and figure out how to be a tidier person. Um, but that's not necessarily the case. We have to look more deeply.
And of course, that last thing doesn't hit, that's their problem, right? Whether they're going to go
Right.
to therapy or not. Anyway,
Yeah, the only way that that would work is if I, as a tidy person, examine myself thoroughly and decide I don't have an anxiety issue or a control issue. I just, and this person is capable of change and we respect and trust each other. I can say, this is really deeply important to me. It's kind of a deal breaker. I love you and I have a hard time living with you. I'm wondering if you might be willing to work on this.
right. Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good.
Hmm.
Well,
Yeah, so
very, very
this
important topic.
Yeah, and these skills, which are hard to learn, are very, very worthwhile. And what I love about them, and in fact, most coaching skills, is that they work on a micro scale in marriages and friendships and work relationships, but they also work on a macro scale. Because once we learn to do this in our personal relationships, we can do this with other things in the world. What is my peace? How can I be the change that I want to see in the world?
Mhm. Very,
And one last thing I want to offer is one way to step up in any situation is when in doubt, be kind. Kindness is always an option.
very wise. Very wise. Well, I have the feeling that people listening to this may be thinking of some of the problem of their own, because most of us, I don't think there's very many people around that don't have some issue or problem that they're chewing on at any one time. So I'm hopeful that your words will really have helped them, Susan. So I thank you so very much. And for everybody listening, Susan and I will continue with these recordings. They're on YouTube. They are on my website, which is serenityandhealth.com. If you subscribe to either of those two, then you'll get them automatically. And Susan's also putting the links on her website. If she hasn't, she will soon, which is rigsintegralcoaching.org. And we're both hoping that this will provoke some deep thinking and discussion, and that we will all work together to make a difference in the messy world. I just realized that our title, we were talking about messy and tidy, and I just realized that's our title. Anyways. Um, Thank you all for being with us. Thank you, Susan, and we'll see you again soon. Bye bye.